Okay, well, welcome everybody. I see people joining into the webinar. So in these first minutes, we will, of course, let people find the door to the webinar, make sure they've come to the right place, settle into their chairs, get their cup of tea or beer or whatever it is you want to be drinking while you listen to us. To make conversation while we're waiting for everybody to join in, I can wish everybody a happy 8th of May, at least here in France, where I currently am. The 8th of May is a day to think about peace in Europe. So that's a positive message. Also happens to be my son's birthday. So there are two important things I think about on this day. So I hope that everybody's having a good day as I've been having, and I hope my son's been having as well. I'm going to give it another minute, and then we will kick off this exciting panel about a really important issue. You know that because you're joining the seminar, delivery workers in the platform economy. I see the happy birthday messages are coming through the chat. Thanks very much, David. I'll pass that on. Okay, well, I think we're going to kick off. So welcome to this discussion this evening about delivery workers in a platform economy. My name's Niccolo Milanese. I'm Director of European Alternatives and also a steering committee member of Another Europe is Possible. And the two organizations, Another Europe and European Alternatives, putting on this talk together about this crucial issue of the rights and working conditions of delivery workers in the platform economy, opening up a kind of European panorama about this issue. It's part of this conversation is part of a larger project that we call Workers Without Borders, that is looking at the situation of workers in particular in crucial sectors of the economy. And we're starting with three: platform workers, which we're discussing today, the care workers in the care economy, which will be a discussion we have in a couple of weeks on the 26th of May, and agricultural workers, which we'll be discussing on the 14th of June. Looking at these three sectors in which there's a certain degree of innovation, there's also tends to be a significant number of migrant workers, and migrant workers in our experience as organizations are often at the front lines of changes that are happening to the whole economy. So it's no accident that it's often migrant workers who are fighting and mobilizing first, because they are the ones who are first affected by the way the economy is changing. So we're wanting to look at the situation across Europe in those three sectors, and that's a timely thing to do as well, we think, because perhaps obviously the COVID pandemic over the past year has put a bit of a spotlight on the conditions in those sectors, and so there's perhaps a little bit more of a chance to make policy changes. Also, it happens that European policy makers are paying a little bit more attention, both for the reasons of the pandemic, but also even before the pandemic, there was an awareness that there were serious problems, I think, in the platform economy in particular, but also in care and agricultural work and in other sectors. And so the European Union, for example, has already started to take some measures already prior to the crisis. And just these last days, in fact, yesterday and today, there's a social summit in Porto of the European Union in which the social pillar is being discussed. And one of the ambitions of that social pillar is to get rid of precarity in the European workforce. Then we can discuss, perhaps we will discuss a little, whether any of the measures that are proposed are sufficient to do that. There's still, I think, a lot of questions about how to get rid of precarity. And so we're going to try through this debate also to come up with some proposals to put to the European Union, but also neighbouring countries. The UK is an important one. So that's a little bit the context of this discussion. I want to say that then after this sort of first cycle in these coming weeks, looking at the European situation, we also want to link it up to the global situation, because these changes in the economy are happening everywhere, and workers are mobilizing everywhere to try and improve their rights. There's many examples I could mention, but of course, particularly problematic environment to doing that is in China. And if we think about Chen Zhaoring, who was just a couple of months ago arrested in China for trying to organize delivery workers in the platform economy, we see that the conditions can really be quite fierce in some places. And so we want to open up also to a more global perspective in a second stage of this project. But bringing it back to today, there's one further reason why it's topical. It's the right moment for this discussion. It's that the European Union is engaging in a process called the Conference on the Future of Europe, starting from tomorrow. And another thing we want to achieve with this cycle of events is to make proposals to feed into that process and make sure that workers' rights are heard through that channel as well. In today's discussion, we've got three really fantastic speakers. I'll briefly introduce them and say how this is going to work, and then I will let them take the floor. So Joanna Borowicka is going to speak first. She's a sociologist who has been thinking and studying a great deal about these changes in the platform economy. So she's going to give a kind of overview of the situation and pose some crucial questions. Ori Mittenmeier is someone who has personal experience of being a delivery worker and then fighting to improve the rights of people in the platform economy. And so he is going to share some of his experiences. And Henry Lopez, the General Secretary of the Independent Workers of Great Britain, will talk about union organizing and some of the recent wins that they have recently achieved in the United Kingdom. Throughout the discussion, you're very welcome to pose questions in the chat. We'll try and make it as interactive as we can as we go through, but I'll also make sure that there's plenty of time in the last half an hour or so for us to have a discussion. One last note is that Ori is rather hard of hearing. And so if he turns his mics on and asks people to repeat, don't be offended. It's because he needs you to repeat or say things clearly. And to help him out, we've put on something called live transcript, which you can find at the bottom of your screen. It may be that others of you it's useful to follow the transcript of what people are saying as this goes on. So without further ado, I want to turn to you, Joanna, to perhaps give an overview, as wide as you can, as a European perspective, of the way you think digitalization in particular has affected the economy and some of the problems that's caused when it comes to workers' rights. Joanna, please.
Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome from Berlin. This is where I'm currently based, where I've lived for the last 7 years, and where I'm conducting my research. I want to open with an image of a guy driving a minivan, not a truck, just a small minivan. He's delivering parcels. He's delivering um, what we buy on Amazon, maybe for Amazon, maybe for DHL. Actually, he just takes gigs from whoever pays more at the moment. He doesn't actually work for any of these companies. Yet he spends 14 hours a day driving. He doesn't actually take breaks. He doesn't take breaks to eat, to use the toilet. He's just trying to get as many deliveries done as possible because he's paid by the delivery and not by the hour. So I think that if we think about him, and it is very likely that he is from Poland. He's looking forward to being able to go back to see his family, his wife, his kids. Um, I think the important thing about this image is that he's working for this chain of platform economy, and we often think about Deliveroo, Uber, Foodora, all these companies that deliver food, but he is the visible part of the chain, the invisible part of the chain. And what he has in common with the Deliveroo and Foodora and all these companies is the fact that he's self-employed. And what I want to talk to about today is that uh, what is really hidden behind the term platform economy is not this high tech or even innovative business model, because there's nothing innovative about exploitation. And the platform economy really rests on a phenomenon that is quite old, and this phenomenon is self-employment. This truck driver that I'm describing, he is not an employee of the company, which means that he doesn't have minimum wage, he doesn't have vacation, he doesn't have sick days, and he has incentives to work as much as possible because he's paid per gig. So, two very old phenomenon that I will talk about today is actually self-employment and migration, because these are, in other words, it is not technology, but these gaps and protections that we know, have known for a long time, gaps of protections of migrants and self-employed, that make platform economy possible. But technology, of course, has played an important role because it adds a layer of digital to what have already been very precarious working conditions. And I will also talk about that, how that works. So finally, I will show how we all pay the price of this gap in law, which leaves the self-employed outside the system. And finish by asking a very, very urgent question: is what should be done to protect these self-employed mobile workers? But first, I really want to take a look at the social and legal context in which platforms were able to spring up. And these are the three interrelated phenomena that I already mentioned. Two of them, it's important to remember that two of them predate any discussions about technology and the gig economy, and only one is quite new and related to digital capitalism. The first of these phenomena is self-employment. I already mentioned that self-employment is key here, and that it's not new, because this discussion about destandardization of work or flexibilization of the job market is a very broad process, and one that we have witnessed for a couple decades. A key to remember here, though, is that self-employment can be forced or voluntary. So, forced is, of course, where you don't really have a choice because your economic conditions mean that either you sign the 0-hour contract or the Werkvertrag, or there's no job for you. But oftentimes, when we hear people that participate in this discussion about self-employed, is people that actually chose self-employed, and going solo was quite liberating for them. And another thing that is important is that in many countries, it is quite clear that self-employment can be fake or bogus. There are many terms for this if there's only one employer. But the result is the same. There are no protections, whether it's forced or voluntary, whether it's fake or whether there's one employer or multiple ones. The result is the same. There are no protections. There's no minimum wage, no vacation, sick days, or what is important, no right to unionize or to strike. Now, another thing is that self-employment plays out differently in different countries. In general, when we think about migration and we look at the data by the OECD data about the percent of total employment that is covered by self-employment, it is higher in countries where migrants come from than in countries where they go to. So for example, if we take example of migration to Germany, Poland has 20% of self-employed, Turkey has 31%, Germany is only 9%. So I think UK is a little bit of an exception here because it also witnessed a huge destandardization and flexibilization of the job market, but it's still at 15%, so it's significantly lower. So when I've done a lot of research with different types of migrants, including refugees, undocumented migrants, and economic migrants from the EU and beyond, and I think that when we look at this, the fact that they come from countries from where self-employment is high, there's often a narrative that they come sort of with like a broken, from the perspective of the receiving countries, which have this strong labor system, that they come from countries where there is a bit of a broken labor system, and that they bring these values that they don't care about the unions. But I think there's also a different way to look at it. And this is something that I often hear from talking to people, is that migrants are often the best educated people in their communities, or the most entrepreneurial mindset. And migration in general is kind of an enterprise. This is something that requires a lot of self-drive and mobility and being able to adapt to new conditions. So the people that migrate are often the people that are most excited about being on their own and not having a boss, and they really buy into this entrepreneurship narrative. And entrepreneurship is the new mantra of our times, and we know where it comes from. It's the California ideology and the Silicon Valley. Although, of course, one could argue it rests on an older trend. It is really what one sociologist, Oliver Nachtwey, calls the digital spirit of capitalism that has really plugged into these pre-existing phenomena that I've discussed. And the digital spirit of capitalism, just to tell you briefly, is this idea that social problems can be redefined as technological problems, and that they can be solved with technology and with proper, for example, AI or algorithms. So part of this solutionism contains certain disenchantments with politics and institutions, and that also includes the unions. So what I'm trying to say here is that it is, of course, the platforms that we know rest on technology, but what is really new here is the idea that if what is missing in your life is the lack of autonomy, technology will give you that. And that technology is what will set you free from the constraints of time, from the constraints of place, because you can work anytime from any place that you want. And it will be possible for you to work solo, so without any colleagues. And what is most important, you will not have a boss. And this is something that a lot of especially migrants want to say. I don't want to move to another country and have a boss, especially from a different country than my own. So what I've tried to show you so far is that it's not this high-tech innovation that really helped platforms to click and fit right in, especially in the urban modern centers. It was really, and this is what came out in our research, how catchy this slogan was. The slogan to be your own boss. And thousands of people that sign up for Deliveroo, Foodora, and Uber Eats, and all these companies really believed this promise. And this was the starting point of our research with Deliveroo and Foodora here in Berlin, two companies for food delivery. Slightly different business model because Deliveroo was working uniquely with self-employed people, whereas Foodora hired for these short-term contracts, but still they were employees. But what we really wanted to see was the fact that they didn't have a boss and they only got their orders through the app. So this is where technology really comes in. The app as a boss. And the promise of that was exhilarating for a lot of young people from many, many different countries. It was very interesting to see this very multicultural, multilingual environment of young, very vibrant people that were really excited about riding the bike. They really thought that this was a great job. And what happened is that they believed that this job will give them the flexibility to combine it with other passions or maybe with studying. So the autonomy, the flexibility that I've been talking about was really the key promise. Well, unfortunately, and this is what the topic of our research was, there is the fact that there is not a boss doesn't mean that there is no management. In fact, there is a new type of management that we call the algorithmic management, and it is very controlling, and it means that the app becomes where the control is embodied. And the way it works is that every time that you make a delivery, you have to swipe for each step of the delivery, and then incredible amounts of data are collected about your work, and that data is not only used to optimize the algorithms for the companies, but it's used to control the workers. And this works because there's often in these companies a system where performance is evaluated, and only the people who have the best performance are given access to the best shifts. So in other words, if you haven't been working really, really hard and your statistics are not so great, you will not have access to the shifts that work for you. You might not be able to drive or ride in the time that's good for you. So this flexibility that was the promise is gone. And on top of that, and this is the kind of digital layer to precarity that we discovered, is that in every job place there are certain rules, and part of the job is for somebody to explain you the rules and for you to learn the rules. This is not how it works in a lot of these companies. How it works is that you have to kind of work with the app and figure out the rules and the algorithms as you go. And there is no company, there's no person that you can call and ask if you have a problem, if you're trying to figure out what consequences of certain actions that you will take will be. And that often the writers complain that you send an email and you never get an answer back, and there's no feedback mechanism. If you want to say that something with the app is not working, something the system is not working, there's nobody really listening. So this plus the data-driven performance evaluation that I described, the fact that you are constantly monitored, is what we call the digital layer of precarity. But precarity, as we discovered, for these people, basically means the same old things that have always been talked about, which is poor working conditions, higher insecurity, and lack of ability to plan for the future. So most people leave these jobs, and this huge rotation of riders means that on one hand, it's very hard to organize and to change anything. But if you look at it from the other perspective, it also means that many people in Berlin have had the experience of riding for one of these companies, for working, for example, also in Amazon warehouse. So what is the result of all this? The result is that if you live in a big urban center and you're a young person, so imagine Berlin, London, Paris, a lot of young people from around the world had this experience of this digital precarity, and this is what I call Erasmus minus. You have multicultural environment, so in a way it's a positive thing that there's some kind of unifying experience that all these people, very different people, have. But it's Erasmus minus because what we're talking about is basically an internship to precarity, an internship to entrepreneurship, because for a lot of these people, their first job will be being an entrepreneur, self-employed on bike. And what it means is that, so I already mentioned that if we look at the countries where migrants come from, this is where the labor protections are weaker. And that, so it's a geographical problem, but now we also have a generational problem where a lot of young people didn't really understand when we talk about certain concepts like gute Arbeit, good work. When we talk about labor laws, nobody has ever had a chance to explain to them what a work contract is and what benefits it brings. So this is my experience. This is after talking to many workers from Eastern Europe, many workers that only ever knew these kind of jobs, is that the deterioration of working conditions plus this overall ideology of the Silicon Valley means that there's not only a deterioration of working conditions, but there's a deterioration of values, or deteriorations of an image of what a perfect employment situation should be. And I sign up for this newsletter of somebody who was an editor of a column in one of the newspapers, and then today I get an email saying I'm going solo. Going solo, going self-employed is the new holy grail of work. And I think that I painted a scenario in which we're talking about this guy that maybe is less visible, or driving for Amazon or DHL, or the Deliveroo student from Poland or India. But we're talking about also a broader phenomenon of self-employed that doesn't only concern the most vulnerable that we are focusing on today, and the people that really have to be protected. But what I've discovered in a lot of discussions about this topic is that we are in this scenario where self-employment is becoming the new norm. So when we, in our maybe more policy-oriented bubble, talk about how to solve this problem, think about what could be done, then a lot of people in the broader society don't really understand what we're talking about, because for them, this is the new thing. This is how we should all be self-employed. And even if we are employed, and this is what COVID really brings about, then we should have the working conditions in our employment contract that give us the flexibility that's almost on par with the self-employed people. So we should also be able to work anytime we want, from any place we want, and with as little supervision as possible. So I do think that the most important question today is what can we do to protect people who are the mobile workers who are really forced to self-employment, who really don't understand what the consequences of self-employment are. And I would be very excited to hear from the other panelists what they think that could be done, should be done. I have to say that I'm a little bit skeptical when I hear that the answer should be to strengthen the unions. I think the unions have done a great job. Some of them, for example, in Berlin, we had the FAU, the anarcho-syndicalist union, that mobilized delivery food riders. And we will hear from somebody from NGG that even went as far as establishing a Betriebsrat, a works council. So there have been real successes. But when I hear, for example, recently from Joe Biden that unions should be the answer, that we will now make a huge investment in building unions, and at the same time there's a news that elections in an Amazon warehouse failed, and that even in a place where there's fully normally employed people, a platform was able basically to lobby successfully to portray unions as a bad actor. I mean, unions don't love migrants, and they definitely don't love self-employed people. And to be honest, migrants and self-employed don't love unions back. I'm not saying that resistance doesn't work, and I know, and I have written about successful cases of resistance also without unions, because every time there's control in the management system, there can be resistance, and resistance is not futile. In this case, for example, in Deliveroo, they have been annoying enough that Deliveroo basically got scared that there's gonna be a lawsuit, and they pulled away from Germany. So, companies leaving our countries, platforms going bankrupt, that's a good result. That means that this business model is not working, and that there has been enough pressure from either bottom up or from the general public that this business model is just not going to catch in. But we shouldn't be happy, because that means that they move to Brazil, Saudi Arabia, or places where where this labor model is weaker. So I'm skeptical of the emphasis that I hear often on unions or organizing, because it means that the burden of responsibility is moved from bottom up for the workers themselves, even though, as I think I explained, there are really big obstacles to bringing about change. So I personally think that the change should come from top down, and I am listening to what happened in Porto yesterday, and I am very excited that there's a new agency, the European Labour Agency, and I think that we should really invest in defining the mandate of this agency, and include very specific recommendations that we want in terms of the self-employment problem. I mean, I think first I would be very excited to hear what are the proposals, but I think that one thing that we can definitely go with, there has been enough court rulings in European countries that show that companies like Deliveroo or Uber, that's not real self-employment, that's fake self-employment, that it should just be a European policy to say that this is banned.
I think that's a really good point. You've made so many. I think that let's get to the point about bogus self-employment, perhaps when we've gone through all the speakers, because I mean I guess each of them has something to say, and Henry in particular, about that, given the recent judgments in the UK. So if it's okay with you, I want to say that I think that you've done a great job of demystifying the kind of technological messianism inside the platform economy, and I think that pointing out that really these kinds of businesses have exploited the lack of protections that already were there, particularly for self-employed people, particularly for migrants, and I guess maybe you would agree also for younger people in general who are badly protected in our social system. So I think that's a really powerful way of talking about it. And I think the way that you sort of drew the broader implications of a change of mindset amongst a whole generation, maybe even parts of a whole society, in terms of what people are aspiring to, as really the big challenge. But I think that happily, not everybody not everybody kind of puts up with it, and some people, as you say, do fight back. So I want to, if it's okay, move on and hear from someone who worked in this economy and did fight back. Ori, you worked as a delivery rider, and I want you to share your story. That the conditions, you can describe what the conditions were like and what drove you then to try and campaign to change them, and the ways in which you've been trying to do that. Ori, please.
Yes, thank you for the invitation, and good evening to everybody listening here. The situation, I think, for 3 or 4 years ago, I was working at Fodora first and then at Deliveroo, and you can pretty much say that all of us were, I'm sorry to say it like that, but I learned to use drastic word to describe the drastic situation. We were in a fucked up situation. We were in a situation that we had to ride every day. My typical shift was like 10 to 11 hours a day with my own bike. I took something like about 100, between 100 and 110 kilometers I ride with my own bike cycle, which I had to pay for myself. And if any one of you has a little bit experience with bike equipment, and knowing that the weather is not always like sunny and it's dry and whatever, but the weather is very stormy most of the time, then you will get a pretty much good idea of how expensive it is to keep your bike fixed, to keep your bike working, to make sure that you can work at any time possible, even if it's storming, because we have been paid by the hour. So basically means at this time we got something like €9, around €9 each hour, and for each hour we wasn't around, we didn't get paid. We had to use our own mobile phone, and on the mobile phone we had to install the app which Fodora forced us to use it. And this was a big problem because we have to give the apps a lot of permissions to search our data, to track us 24/7, which is a really big problem. If you think about it, that when you are in your private room, you are trying to rest, and through or Deliveroo could still track you that you're actually at home. This is like a dystopian nightmare. And this was a big problem, the collecting of information about our personal life. But at the same time, the app was always working, was always switched on, which means we had to buy way more new mobile phones than you normally would need to. So let's say in a year, every 3 or 4 years, you would buy one mobile phone. But for the typical rider in my days, it was like I had to buy every 6 or 7 or 8 months a new mobile phone, because the battery power was wasted so much because it was always turned on. And if I didn't want that after 2 hours, I had to break up my shift. Then I had to buy a new one. So the next big problem was the contracts. We were employed in 6 months contracts, which means that we always was in some kind of toxic atmosphere, because we were always under a lot of pressure, because we always knew if we are going to resist, if we are not perform well enough, work hard enough, we won't get a new contract. Like Deliveroo Fodora never really told us that we won't get it, but they use some specific mechanism, like they put up some competition, and then they always praising the top 5 riders, and then asking the other riders, the other handlers, to be faster. Otherwise, they couldn't guarantee that we could get a new contract, stuff like that. How all those things escalated is in Christmas, I think, a few days before, because we didn't get our salary the second month in a row. And when we confronted them, we asked them, what's up? Why don't you pay us the money? We need the money. When's this soon to be due? Deliveroo of Fedora, they both told us that we would get at least Christmas money around like 150 euro, and we should be happy that we at least have a little bit money for Christmas. And after Christmas and New Year's Eve, they would see about the money they still had to pay. And this was the moment where we always like, okay, discussing our options. We didn't know what to do at this time. We didn't even know that there are labor unions. We didn't even know about our labor right. We didn't. The only option we knew how to fight back is to collectively quit this job. But luckily for us, there was one guy who knew about the labor union and basically stopped us and told about the wait. You have two options: to leave right now with this of the Deliveroo, but then tomorrow they will hire 100, 200 new riders. So that's it. Or you have the second option, you can organize yourself and you can fight back, because especially in Germany, there are some certain labor laws who are protecting people like us in a certain, to a different degree. Um, Needless to say that we were pretty much excited to hear about the option that there are basically ways to strike back, and that we basically have the right in Germany to go on strike and whatever. And so we went to the labor union, we made up an appointment, and the first step what happened was basically nothing but political education. So we have been educated by the labor secretaries, what exactly are labor laws, what are our options. This was the first time we heard about the Works Council, the option to found a work council, and the powers that comes with it, like that you can force the companies to do certain things in order to protect the labors. And then we did basically decided, okay, fuck it, let's do it. We have nothing to lose. And we basically did this. We first tried to organize ourselves. And at this time, we didn't knew that we already did classical organizing work. Like we already have establishing a community, because before we ever was in contact with the labor union, we organize ourselves like helping out each other. Because we had the problem at our workplace, it was almost impossible to meet each other face to face. This is one big problem. We were always in a hurry. We were always driving really fast and didn't have time to talk. But there was some certain hotspot in different places in the city, restaurants who has getting a lot of orders. And those orders, those restaurants were the places where we were able to talk to the writer and say, hey, I didn't see you fade before, you are new. I'm already working 2 years here. Let's meet up later, 4 hours, 5 hours later after the shift at this place or at this location. And I will tell you how the rules are. As Joanna already said, that many of the rules the laborers didn't know about, but those who had already had worked for a few years already figured it out. So we basically met each other up and we showed them, okay, what are the shortcuts? What do you need to know? What kind of clothes do you need to buy? How to fix the bikes? And with doing this, we already established a spirit of solidarity among us, so that we establish a trust from the people who already was working a long time at Deliveroo Fedora to the new people who just joined. And then when we decided to found a working council, we basically only had to write in the WhatsApp group, come to this day at this location at this time. And in Cologne, everybody came, all of the writers that came because they trusted us. And since that, the whole situation pretty much escalated, because at this time there were two options of how to work at Deliveroo. You could choose to work in a 6-month contract, or you could work in a freelancer contract, in a self-employment contract, which we now were so-called fake self-employment contracts. And at the day, our people has voted for a working council. Deliveroo declared basically war on us by changing all of the contracts from 6-month contracts to freelancer contract. And it's important to know that in Germany right now, if you are self-employment, you have no right of democratic participation, no right of minimum wage, or no right of social insurance and those kind of stuff. So they basically tried to destroy us, which in the end they were able to do. But we decided to fight against it by starting an online campaign, because we realized, okay, with the usual traditional organizing methods, we won't get very far. So what do we need to do is that we need to mobilize and alert the public, because at this time we were doing work, this kind of work whose invisible to the society, such as delivering food. People never really saw us as humans. They already saw us as just workers who just doing their job and that's it. So we needed to scandalize those kind of working conditions and what we are up against it. And we were using social media, started the campaign, and we wasn't really sure how it's going to work out, and we're really surprised by the feedback we were becoming from the public. Suddenly, politicians came to us. Suddenly, the labor unions were supporting us stronger than ever before. Suddenly, the public, people, press would ask about it and would put a lot of pressure on Deliveroo, and would put a lot of pressure on the politicians to change something about those kind of situation. And at this time, we decided, okay, well, we might have lost the work council, but we didn't lose the struggle, because we will keep organizing the wider at Fedora, establishing more work councils in order to put a power force inside the company. Because the work council is a very important tool to call all the riders together and inform them about the work and organize them. Because the problem is, the biggest problem we still face to this day is the contracts of 12 months now. It's Lieferando who are buying the companies of Fedora. They had bought it, and but the problem has still remained the same. So this is the situation right now. We established 6 different work councils in the whole of Germany, and we are trying to educate workers about the right, because we are facing the problem that the people are coming from different countries, from East Europe, but also from South America and other places, who have different ideas of labor union. Depending from which country you are from, the name labor unions, it's still some kind of, or some level of fear. So so we had to acknowledge this kind of fear and learn how to deal with it. And so we had to find some specific kind of people, of riders who are coming from different countries, and try to empower them, like try to take away the fear and replace it with trust in our work. And we always looked at those specific kind of people who had also the trust of their communities. So basically, we were looking for leaders among the communities and trying to put them on our side. And this is what we keep working to this day. And this is our strongest weapon and against those kind of exploitation here in Germany. And we still put a lot of at the side, or with the help of the labor union, put a lot of pressure on the German politics to dismiss so-called limited contracts, such as 12 or 6 months, because as long as they are around in Germany, as long it will be possible to exploit the people who really need those kind of jobs.
Great, this is really interesting experience, Ori. I want to just ask you, you mentioned the different people having different fears about labor unions. I wonder, when you were trying to organize the riders, were there some of the riders who were really very hostile to the idea of organizing? And what would be the kind of reasons, do you think, that people might not want to organize? Is it fear of losing their jobs? Is it, I don't know, they don't have time? And how did you approach those problems?
There were many different problems. One of the main problems, I was among them, is fear of losing a job. I needed the money, and I didn't want to risk my only income and risk a future scenario on living on the streets, having no home and whatsoever. So yeah, it needed a lot of trust. And secondly, we are talking about political organization. We are talking about a society where political institutions are dominated by white people. Obviously, I am black, and I learned early on in my life to not really trust people, especially white people, to listen to them when it's about changing your own situation. Because the hard truth is, it wasn't really about my situation. It was more about personal gain or whatsoever. And thinking like that, a lot of other people of color has been thinking like that, and that I cannot put them at fault for thinking like that. This is the second reason. And then the third reason, when the labor union invited us, of course, the first thing I saw was a room full of white people. So it was two white women who never really stopped trying to gain our trust. Like they were really like, yeah, we know it's problematic. We know there's a lot of problems to solve. But we need to do something about this, and we really want you to be one of the people who can do something about it. So like they basically empowered me, they teach me and whatever. The other reasons are, as I already said, the fear of labor unions, because they make experiences in their countries such as that if they're going to organize, police will come and beat them to death, shoot them or whatever, being burned alive or being kidnapped in the night. So these are stories we have been told about when we had refugees, and they were really afraid because they had the idea of, okay, this is a political institution. Everybody who is coming from a political institution is really, really bad news. So we should stay as far as possible and stay as quiet, as silent as possible. So we had to basically try to explain how things are working. Like, of course, we didn't lie. We said, yeah, sometimes police, or many times, too many times, police are fucked up in Germany too, but not on those kind of levels such as in the United States or whatsoever. So it's pretty much more safer to organize here. Then educational stuff. Many people just didn't know what are those kind of things. They just thought, okay, this is only what rich people are doing. So it's a rich people's game, and not like in our interest. And then there are also some, Joanna told already about it, that at the first time they were like pretty excited about the fact that there's self-employment, that they can be boss on their own time, and they felt it like it was an attack on them when we tried to change the condition, because they felt like we were trying to take something away. But then, luckily for us, most of the time, especially when winter hits, they realize that yes, the idea of self-employment might work in at some kind of salary income, but if the salary is too small, that you can't afford anything, that suddenly when it's raining, when it's storming, suddenly you have to pay way more, double the times than you were paying in summer, then you realize how precarious the situation is. Then they hesitantly started to believe us and talk with us about it. Then other reasons were, of course, stuff as language barriers. At first, we were pretty much arrogant. We talked, well, we, the German speaking, we organized, and then that's it. Until we realized we are like maybe 10 or 20% of the people working there who can speak fluently German and understand everything, while the other 80% doesn't even understand anything what the hell we were talking about. So this was a big mistake we did at the first. So we tried to change this and put in translators. We tried to empower the people who were, I don't know, speak Farsi, Arabic, Turkish, or whatever, and then to involve them in making events where the German language was forbidden, where sometimes German people can be welcomed and say, hey, it's great that you are here. please go to the other room, there's food, there's something you're doing, chill, take the time. But right now it's not your show. The shows belong to the people who are coming from India, from Syria, whatsoever. We have translators there. And suddenly we saw that there are so many different perspectives and so many different worries, so that we were able to first time really address the worries of those people, because before they were kind of too shy. I mean, this is what I experienced a lot in political discussions in Germany, when I came to, I don't know, to an event, to a discussion, and somebody stood up and suddenly talked very academic, very political, and I didn't understand anything what people were saying, and was really, really, really fast discouraged and wanted to leave. And we changed it, and suddenly we found new people who were ready to fight and wanted to fight with us, because they felt they are equal, and not like equal by words, but treated equal by words and actions. So that's a short oversee. And of course, we had women workers, female workers in our ranks, which had different problems to face, because we also realized, oh damn, it's all men's again. We have to change that, and we did, and when we involved female workers, women, suddenly we could be able to see problems we didn't see before, as those kind of stuff. So maybe that's as a short overview before I keep talking and talking and talking.
Ori, it's so interesting and somehow inspiring the way you address these kinds of problems. I have so many questions, but I want to bring in Henry now, because he's also someone who has helped to create a different kind of trade union, and so that's one of the main things I want to ask Henry, to pick up some of the threads of the discussion so far. We've heard, Joanna said earlier on that maybe traditional trade unions have not been so good at representing migrants, precarious workers, and not good at dealing with self-employed people. I guess the Union of Independent Workers of Great Britain has come up with an alternative strategy, so it would be interesting to hear about that. And both Joanna and Ori have mentioned this question of somehow bogus self-employment. And I know the Independent Workers of Great Britain have been involved in this case against Uber, which has challenged this idea that Uber workers are really self-employed. So on these two aspects, and then anything else you want to bring in, it would be really valuable to have your contribution. So Henry, please.
Hi everybody, and thank you for the invitation. It's great to be here and hear the story of Ori and also Joanna, about how this how the gig economy is affecting workers, especially migrant workers, but also workers who don't have other choice, workers who need a job, and therefore have to accept what is what's available. Unfortunately, we have seen that technology is changing the way we work, the way we live, and unfortunately, like labor laws are not keeping up with that technology. And we have seen, especially during this pandemic, how not even the governments are prepared to help these workers. We have seen these workers being called key workers, workers being told that they are essential, but they are essential to keep the country running, but they have not been essential when they need protections, when they need employment rights, when they need improvement in their conditions of work. So in a way, the pandemic has been good for these workers, in a way that this has helped to bring to the public eye the problems of these workers and the precariousness of their lives, and how this is affecting them. It's been bad because it has exacerbated their problems. We've seen that in the cases of couriers that we represent in the cases of private hat drivers who work for Uber, additionally, and all the other platforms. We have seen that these workers have had to work unprotected and still under precarious conditions of employment. So we as a union have been campaigning in the streets, in the courts, organizing workers. We are a dynamic union, new dynamic union that are trying to organize the so-called unorganizable, the forgotten workers who are forgotten by the government. And we have been successful in many cases challenging these employers. In many companies, obviously we're talking about big companies here like Delivery and Uber, but there is many companies where couriers, for instance, work, where we have been able to achieve increase in pay, to get proper contracts of employment, but forcing employers, as I said, challenging it in the courts, but also in their doorstep by organizing the workers. So we, in our union was created by migrant workers, migrant cleaners trying to organize due to the failure of a bigger union to represent them. And that's the reason we're still here since we basically since the union began, and we have been organizing workers from cleaners, security guards, organizing workers in universities, organizing yoga teachers, nannies, and now we have couriers, we have private hat drivers, foster carers, workers who you never thought would organize in a union like the IWGB. But why they decided to organize in these unions? Because there is so much in common that it's not just about cleaners being outsourced and facing the problems with outsourcing and low-paid jobs, but also realizing that there is a problem. The problem is wide, and the difficulty for us in organizing has been that this new way of working by workers, for instance, being called independent contractors or workers and self-employed. The problem is that they are all over the place. So there's not that like they are in one workplace, which it might be a bit easier to organize. Obviously, it's not easy to organize migrant workers and low workers on precarious jobs for the same reasons that Ori was saying in terms of the issues they face by victimization or by experiencing problems that they come already from back from their countries as well in some cases. But I think what have we been successful is in organizing these workers and winning. As I said, we were talking about the cases of, for example, Uber, where we've been fighting in the courts. We have won in the court, challenging them with their bogus employment contracts. And yeah, make no mistake that the recent ruling of the Uber case is not about Uber giving this to the workers. It's about the workers who organized and fought them, as I said, on the streets, on their doorsteps, protesting, demanding, but also challenging in the courts. And that's why Uber has been forced to give some of the conditions to these workers. And in the case of Uber, obviously there is some, it's a huge victory for because we've been fighting really hard to get this. But it's not all. There is the court's rule was that workers are entitled to national living wage, pension contributions, paid holiday, but still there is other demands that unfortunately this is not backdated. We as a union are putting pressure on the government and also calling on the HMRC, which is the tax revenue, to basically to tell Uber to enforce the Supreme Court ruling on unpaid waiting times, and also we believe that the company basically this company is still taking workers for a ride, because there is many things that still are not given to these workers in terms of giving them the benefits, like for example minimum wage as soon as they log on their apps, not just will they are as soon as they, as I said, they log in the apps, but also they should have the right to refuse unsafe work, and also have a protection equipment as well to do their job. So as I said, is a positive step. However, as I said, Uber is still falling short, and we need to keep campaigning. We need to keep putting pressure on them. We recently also had a strike on the 7th of April, on the day that delivery was putting their up on the stock exchange, and it was successful because we managed to get investors to not to invest in the platform. We have around 17 Ps backing the demands for fair terminations, income, and also health and safety protection for riders. We've seen also in a study, an investigation by the Bureau of Investigative Journalists, that some riders were getting as little as £2 an hour. At least one in 3 riders get £2 an hour. So I think there are things like this that we still need to challenge. Obviously, we are challenging many of these platforms, but it's been a long way. This has been achieved by organizing workers, making them believe that we can create that change if we unite and work together. Obviously, there are people that are not easy to organize, as Ori was saying, because some of them don't see this as a job. Some of them are students who just are working to earn a living until they finish their studies, for instance. But the issue is that also these platforms are taking advantage of this to overflow, like in the case of Uber, to overflow the cars, which is leaving workers with less work. But also these platforms are using this to their benefit, because we are fighting as well against unfair terminations. Because whenever there is an allegation, these platforms just, with a click of the button, they dismiss workers without any chance to appeal, which is basically leaving them without job, without income for the families. And it's clear that this is not right, and this is something that we need to keep campaigning. We need to keep fighting in order to improve. And work, when it comes to frontline workers, basically, as we said, the governments have said they are all essential. Yet what we see in practice is basically a two-tier system, which is exploiting precarious workers in the gig economy and migrant workers. The human basically impact in this system has been devastating than ever, especially during COVID. And the way we have been organizing during this pandemic has demonstrated that it's possible to keep organizing, to keep doing stuff, to keep challenging these companies. But it's not an easy ride, but we're trying our best in our union in order to do that. Recently, just this week, we have a demonstration outside Bolt offices, which is a taxi operator as well, because there was a driver who's called Gabriel who was stabbed where he was working, and he was stabbed to death. There's been many assaults on drivers, and the reason we hold a demonstration outside the offices was because although we have written to them to improve their safety in their application, in the app, they haven't done so, and they don't even responded to us. So we have to resort to this practice of, go to doorstep and shame them because they have to improve these conditions. This, put job security for these workers, because the issue is that they're treating these workers just as numbers, and this is a big problem. And this is, the precariousness of these jobs is what is creating all these issues. The government is not doing anything about this, so it's up to the workers to keep campaigning, to keep protesting on the streets, and for us as unions that are protecting these workers to keep challenging them in the courts.
Thanks. Thanks, Henry. It's really inspiring that the success that IWGB has been able to have, and hearing you speak, one feels that the struggle is really ongoing. I just want to ask you one follow-up question. Is that many of these companies, Uber, Deliveroo, are multinational companies acting in many different countries. I want to ask you, as a representative of a union, about transnational degree IWGB is linking up with other unions across Europe, across the world. How does this look? Do you feel like there's a lot of collaboration between unions, or maybe IWGB is quite unique and so there's not many similar unions to join up with? How does it look?
Recently we had, as I said, we have this strike against delivery, and we have workers striking in many cities in London. In the UK, but we also had action internationally, like in Australia, France, Netherlands, Ireland, Spain. We have many colleagues from our countries who are also living the same struggles, and we are creating links in order to fight against these platforms who are exploiting workers in order to improve the situation. I think it's very important that we create these links, because these companies are trying to expand all over the country, and it's the only way to challenge them. They have the governments on their side. They have millions of investors putting millions in the companies. And for us, we are like in our case, we are a small trade union that are fighting over our weight. But therefore, we believe it's very, very important to create those connections of solidarity and fight together in that way in order to improve the situation. We have shown here in the UK that is it possible. We have shown that we forced Uber to do that. We've shown that we have forced many other companies. In the case of Deliveroo, on one day we managed to raise £10,000 for the strike fund. We managed to get MPs to support. We managed to get investors not to invest, and created even a tool to see how workers are being paid £2 an hour. So yeah, I think solidarity is very, very important, and it's very, very crucial, especially at these times that we are not able to do a lot of things that we normally would do in terms of protesting.
Thanks for this. So now I want to sort of open up a more general debate, and anyone from the audience who wants to post a question, please feel free to do so. But perhaps I said at the beginning that one of the things we want to achieve is to get some recommendations from these discussions. And those recommendations could be, if you like, policy recommendations for the governments, whether it's the UK government, whether it's the European Union, international action, whatever. And Joanna already kind of mentioned one, which would be about just getting rid of fake self-employment. So either recommendations like that or recommendations perhaps to other workers or other unions about how to face some of the challenges in the platform economy. So I want to kind of invite each of you back to react to anything you want to react to or develop your thoughts a little bit further, and perhaps propose one or two ideas as recommendations that we can take away from this event. And I want to do that in the next 15 minutes or so. So don't take too long. Don't take too long about it. So maybe we go in the same order. Joanna, if I could start, what recommendations, if you had to formulate them, would you try to put? But you need to unmute yourself. We'd have to say it at some point.
Okay, sorry about that. I just wanted to say that the work that we heard from NGG and IWGB is phenomenal and beyond inspiring. It has already changed the whole scenario, right? We now have MPs, we now have politicians in the European Union that not only have heard the voices of these workers, but are now saying they're actually representing them. This is the best victory that we could imagine for unions. But I want to be very clear, and this is where my recommendation is. There are millions, there are tens of millions of workers across the European Union alone, and not even mention the globe, that will never hear of any of these unions. And this is why I opened with this image of the guy from Poland driving his minivan across Germany. He will never even talk to another driver. It is not the fact that I don't want the unions to be in the driver's seat. They should be, and they will be. But I want to say that this cannot be the only solution. So if I'm supposed to narrow it down to the recommendation, it means that the right to organize, and I don't mean unionize, but the right to organize should be granted to all self-employed people. So in many countries, self-employed people are not legally allowed to unionize. So we have to give the right to organize, because sometimes organization can be very small. And when we listen to Ori and we listen to Henry, we don't hear the amount of work that it takes to even organize elections of a works council. But this is many, many hours. And in many workplaces, there's nobody to do that. There's nobody to, so we should institutionalize the very, very small forms of organizations, and we should give the right to strike to everybody, not only people who have formally collectivized. So right to organize for self-employed people, right to strike for everybody. This is one thing. But the second thing I want to say, that it is not only bogus self-employment that we need to think about. So we have made huge advances in Europe thanks to this amazing legal work, which, by the way, it should just become general policy. Everything that we have heard from courts across Europe, it should just become law in European Union law. But the bogus self-employment is not the only problem. We have many self-employed people that do meet the legal conditions for self-employment. That doesn't mean that they shouldn't have protections. We need to extend our policy recommendations beyond fighting bogus self-employment, because at the bottom there's million people that are actually self-employed. And what does it mean? Does it mean that they don't have to pay into the social security system, for example? The one thing I really want to say is we are all paying the price of the spread of self-employment. That means that there's less money going to social security system. That means that there's less money to going to healthcare system. So that means that it is not only up to the workers themselves, and especially not only up to self-employed workers themselves, to fix this problem. This is a general population problem. So it's like saying, let's leave it up to workers, let's leave it up to unions. It's like saying, let's leave matters of public health to patients. Patients should organize. So if we hear from patients that there's a problem, then we will fix it. No, this is the same. This is a great analogy. if there's a spread of self-employment, then there's people that don't make decent wages, that cannot invest in their own families, in the education of their children, and that there's less money in the social security system, which means that pensions for everybody will be lower, and we will have poverty growing in European Union. So this is a general public problem. So we cannot just leave it up to the workers. We have to, just like with the case of public health system, we just have to vote for politicians that care and have the solutions that we don't maybe not always able to come up with.
Thanks. Thanks. It's really very clear. Ori, what would your recommendations be?
Obviously, it might be a little bit different from that what Joanna is saying. I mean, yes, I agree that many people who are working in those kind of sectors, millions of people never heard of the labor union, but that's the educational problem. That's the problem we have to solve. I mean, we just have to look at history. It had shown that nobody else will take up responsibility but the workers' people. So it is our struggles we have to organize among ourselves and have to fight those kind of exploitation with strikes. We have to unionize because these are our strongest weapon we actually have. I mean, there are no other options to force these companies to actually improve the conditions. So to wait before the people from the top are actually going to discuss about if things are going to change is not enough. I mean, when I'm thinking about it, I mean, up 3 or 4 years ago, I never heard about labor union. But at the same time, I also never really cared and heard about democratic participation rights, about election, about voting, because I never felt part of the society. So this is what basically is one of the big problems we are facing now, that we are living in societies which are separating the people. When you are white or when you are looking like the majority, you are getting some specific kind of, I wouldn't say privilege, but some kind of privileges and some kinds of confidence and feeling that you belong to the society. And then there are other people like me, who are hard of hearing, disabled and black, and always getting communicated that I'm worth nothing, and that I should be happy working this kind of job. And I actually believe that, because that's just what I was thinking, that if I work hard enough, people are going to accept me. But this changed. It changed with only 2 people. There were 2 young women who talked to me, who never gave up on me, who always were there when I were like having doubts, when I was like not feeling confident, when smart people who were academic and educated tried to confuse me with stuff. Then they were at my side and tried to break it down, like in simple words. What does gig economy means? What does work council mean? What does mean to like to, you know, negotiate collective agreement? What does this actually mean? Then I started to develop some trust, and I started to try to educate myself, and I passed it on to the other people, to other workers who never also heard about labor unions or didn't even trust about it. It's small step, and it takes a lot of time. But to me, I don't see another way but to educate our workers' people and to show them that they actually have a lot of power. If you think about it, that the biggest part of migrant workers are making the low-income sector. So if they all suddenly stop to work, the whole system is going to be fucked up. Like nothing is going to work. We can see it already in Germany when the trade union of the train sector is calling for a strike. It's only a small part of people comparing to the total number of the German citizens, but still every German citizen is feeling that, because the trains suddenly are not working. So maybe we have to go more strategic way, that we are going to organize some specific sectors where basically the impact will be like impossible to ignore to all the other peoples and realizing, okay, well, we have to change the condition of the people because they're being exploited. I mean, when we have a big problem, I only can speak for Germany. We have a big problem in Germany with the delivery services, maybe food or parcel, but we never really see them. We never really talk to cleaners at McDonald's We never really see them as humans. We don't even see them as workers, but most of them are black or Turkish or whatsoever. And not only are they not getting paid any money whatsoever, but they are being disrespected, many times being attacked on a racist level. And when I started with some of other people of color organizer, they suddenly felt like, okay, there are people who actually care about them, and there are people who actually want to fight with them to change things. So, but it basically means we need way more organizers. We need way more people who are coming from the different communities, because this is our secret weapons. If you are German and you are trying to organize a community who are basically dominated by Senegal people, good luck with that. So, because then this will be like a whole mess. But if you are getting organizing who's understanding the different culture of the marginalized communities, then yes, we will have a chance to change these things. And I don't see any other option to do that. It may take a lot of time, of course, and I'm not saying this will change in 1 year, but we have to do that.
Thanks, Ori. Henry, I want to have your recommendations. I guess you have many. Your union is there to come up with these kinds of recommendations. But if you choose one or two priorities for addressing the rights of platform workers, and then there's a direct question for you in the chat. Someone is asking if you could expand on the way you calculated that 1 in 3 riders only get £2 an hour, and why it was powerful to have such figures to be able to campaign with. I don't know if you can try to address that as well.
Yeah, obviously, it'd be great, you know, if we can ask, if we can have an answer to improve this situation. I guess at this moment in time, there is no answer on how this is going to be improved, unless the workers take action through the union, like us, for instance, who is organizing them. We've seen that the government, as I said, is not going to change this soon. And many of these big corporations are lobbying government. We saw how, you know, in the delivery day of strike, we have the Rishi Sunak, who is the chancellor, saying that basically he branded Deliveroo as a British tech success. That shows, you know, how they see these companies. They don't see the human side. They see this as a more side of the economic. But as I said, I think John is right. This shouldn't be left only to the workers or the unions. I think this is something that needs to be more wide in order to fight and improve. It has to involve MPs. It has to involve more organizations. I think, as I said, this precarious employment is changing the way we live. Obviously, it's making things easy for people, like ordering food, ordering a taxi, and many other things, you know, using like buying from Amazon. But at the same time, it's leaving the workers in precarious conditions, and families also in these precarious situations. And I think that obviously the recommendations will be to you know, to improve, to fight to improve this. We've been asking in the courts, demanding in the courts, taking these companies to that length to improve the situation. But it's been a long fight. It's been very hard to get even lawyers, barristers to be fighting in the court for us. In a small trade union, if it's low on resources, it's been very difficult. Somehow we have managed to do that, to get people who support us, but it's a difficult situation. And I think at this moment in time, it's the workers who need to keep organizing, who need to keep getting together in the communities, and expanding the voice so we can create, a collective power that is able to fight together with the unions. I mean, that's what I think is a way forward for future. I don't see any other way for things to improve. We have tried the course, we have some success, but it is difficult. And I think at this moment in time, it's the workers who need to organize to improve the situation in this economy.
Thanks, Henry. And I just see that there's another question which maybe you can try to address, which is about the impact of immigration controls on the precarity of workers. In the UK, there's ever tighter immigration controls. I wonder what sort of pressure does that put members of your union potentially under? And to what extent is the union also involved in trying to change the way that immigration is perhaps talked about and controlled in the UK?
Yeah, that's another difficult situation for workers to organize, especially migrant workers who are working on those platforms, but also in precarious employment, not just in the gig economy. We represent the cleaners, for instance, in this country, workers who work in precarious jobs such as hospitality, who are who have the worst conditions of employment, and the only way we have been able to win and achieve better conditions has been through organizing, through protesting, through demonstrating. We see now with this new bill that the government in the UK is trying to pass, which is basically going to silence the voices of these people, going to silence unions like us, because for us the law is the law is not on the side of the migrants, it's not on the side of precarious workers. Unfortunately, that's the way it is in this country. If employer don't pay you 1 month of wages, you cannot get the money back, because there's no institutions from the government that are going to challenge that to an employer. It's left to the worker to get that through the court. Who is going to get a lawyer, is going to pay a barrister to do that job? We have seen many of these cases on a daily basis in this country where people are robbed with their wages, but there is no way. The only way we have been able to get back that has been protesting outside these employers, shaming them. But now, if this bill gets passed, it's going to be very difficult, not just for the workers, but for many organizations who are fighting to improve, fighting against racism, against inequality, against poverty. It's going to be very difficult, and this is something that we have been campaigning as well in order to stop. Just last week we have a demonstration which is called Kill the Bill. We are very supportive because, as I said, it's going to silence many workers and people from migrant communities, and it's going to put them in a difficult situation. So I think in terms of the immigration law, I think it's very difficult now, especially with the hostile environment that we live in here.
Thanks, Joanna. I see you want to come in.
Yeah, I want to mention something, because I was organizing and researching with the sans-papiers, the undocumented migrants in Paris during the Sarkozy era. And that was a time that deportations were, going through the roof. And two things that I learned at that time: it is not impossible to organize if you're undocumented migrants. Many undocumented migrants that were coming from Mali or Senegal had a better education about human rights and workers' rights than many people that I know from Poland, and they were very brave, and they were demonstrating despite the risk of deportation. So it's just, that's what I learned, that sometimes the people that are most vulnerable are the most brave also to organize. But what I also learned is that the immigration controls and the threat of deportation, it's just a part of the system. It is part of the system of what Henry mentioned. The governments are being lobbied by the big corporations to keep certain laws in place. And then from a different angle, other actors are lobbying to tighten immigration, but actually this is the same thing, because the fear of deportation is the thing that will make people accept any working conditions that are in place. So this is the same actors that have interest in both, not necessarily deporting people, because we all know that there is still a lot of need for workers in many sectors. So everybody knows that. But what these actors really want is for people to, I mean, be afraid that they're going to be sent back to their country and to not organize and to not lobby. So this is two sides of the same coin.
I think this is a really powerful point, to link these two kinds of precarity as actually reinforcing one another and acting in the interests of certain powerful actors. Look, I think we've had a really rich discussion this evening, and it's Saturday evening, so I don't want to take up all of your time. I feel like we've launched an important conversation here about the rights of workers in the platform economy. We've come up already with quite a few ideas of what could be proposed to do about it. We've had some really inspiring practices as well. In the chat, my colleague Jörg has left a link for anyone in the audience who wants to suggest further recommendations. And I think that, as I introduced at the beginning, this is really part of an ongoing project of European Alternatives in Another Europe, looking at different sectors and coming up with all kinds of recommendations. So we're going to get back to everybody who's taken part as a speaker or as an audience member in the discussion today with some of these ideas turned into recommendations, and the others that we collect as we go forward, having future conversations. I want to really take the moment to thank Joanna, Ori, and Henry for all their input, and to wish all of us the best of luck and the most forthright courage in continuing to fight for the rights of workers and citizens and residents, really, whether they're working in the platform economy or not. These are tough times for lots of people. And so I also personally, I take some energy from moments like this, even if they're mediated by technology. We can still hear the edifying stories of courage and invention and collective intelligence. So that's what I'm taking forward with me for this evening. I'm now going to go and share it with people that I meet. I encourage you all to do the same. Solidarity to all of you, and hope to see you all soon. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.